Who was Manetho? This is Granny's GodPod number 70. It's now November, and when I began this report at the beginning of October, I had no idea it was such a hot potato. So I'd love you to come with me on the journey I've had. It began when my eye was caught by a vlog by Joel Kramer on the YouTube site Expedition Bible called The Exodus Pharaoh Explained. Joel described Manetho as saying the Exodus Pharaoh was Amenephis, otherwise known as Amenhotep, and concluded it must be Amenhotep II who, he says, reigned from 1450 to 1423 BC. The Exodus, according to 1 Kings 6 verse 1, happened 480 years before the 4th year of Solomon's reign, giving a date of 1446 BC. We know that Amenhotep II's successor should not be his firstborn son, who would have died in the last plague. Also, his predecessor must have reigned for at least 40 years, since Stephen in Acts 7 verse 30 says, after 40 years Moses returned to Egypt after fleeing to Midian. So far, so good. So who was Manetho? He was a secular writer of Egyptian birth, who in about the 3rd century BC served as a priest in Heliopolis, the city of the sun, which was an important city in ancient Egypt and a major centre of Egyptian religion. He wrote a 3-volume chronological history of the Egyptians called Egyptiaca. He had access to early Egyptian records and ordered the rulers into dynasties. Unfortunately, as happens with so many ancient writings, the originals are lost, and his writings are only known in part by being quoted by other authors. While other writers used his king lists, Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, uses some narrative passages. Josephus tells us Manetho had mastered Greek, writing the history of his own country in the Greek tongue. According to Joel Kramer, Manetho describes a people captive in a country with a leader called Moses, who left Egypt, travelled through the Syrian wilderness, and built a city in Judea called Jerusalem. So where does Josephus report what Manetho says, and what exactly does he say? In section 14 of Against Apion, it says this: after the departure of the pastoral people from Egypt to Jerusalem, Thutmose, the king who expelled them from Egypt, reigned 25 years and 4 months. And on his death the kingdom passed to his son Chebron, who reigned 13 years. After him, Amenephis, or Amenhotep, reigned 20 years and 7 months. While Manetho does describe a captive shepherding people who were expelled by the Pharaoh, moved to Judea, and built a city called Jerusalem, he says, according to Josephus, Thutmose was the king who expelled them from Egypt. As far as I can see, Moses is not mentioned, and Amenhotep is not claimed to be the Pharaoh of the Exodus. One king list has Thutmose III reigning from 1479 to 1425 BC, which seems to fit the era of the Exodus. But when we remember Stephen in Acts tells us it was 40 years before Moses returned to Egypt, we need Thutmose to be the king from whom Moses fled, not the king of the Exodus. This is because Thutmose is the only king of the 18th dynasty to reign for more than 40 years. We need his successor Amenhotep II to be the pharaoh of the Exodus, but he reigned from 1437 to 1397 BC, which doesn't seem to fit. However, if we use high chronology dating for the 18th dynasty, Amenhotep II is said to have reigned from 1450 to 1423 BC, so this then fits. I then heard two YouTubers tearing to shreds Joel Kramer's ideas, suggesting high chronology is no longer used by anybody, and upholding the idea that Ramses was the king of the Exodus. Their allegations were opposed in the comments to their YouTube video. I then listened to David Rohl, ROHL, a secular scholar, explaining how challenging the king lists were and how they were still being debated because there are problems with them. Even with the high and low chronologies, there are co-regencies and simultaneous regencies in Upper and Lower Egypt, which upset things. Nobody wants to accept Rohl's suggestions right now because of their implications on Egyptian history. Finally, I came across a vlog from the Armstrong Institute of Biblical Archaeology, in which Christopher Ames looks at the Pharaoh of the Exodus from a different perspective, by not looking at specific years, but at synchronizing events between Egyptian and biblical history. Taking Akhenaten as a starting point, the Amarna letters plead with him for help against the Habiru people during the conquest with Canaan, and these battles fit well with the Israelite or Hebrew conquest of the Promised Land. The religious sphere of Egypt changed to the monotheistic worship of the sun, as they had lost faith in Egypt's numerous gods. Could this be because their gods were powerless against the plagues? Before Amenhotep IV, or Akhenaten, came Amenhotep III, who was a peaceful pharaoh. He had only one military campaign in the south of Egypt. He was well known for constructing statues, some 600 of which were devoted to Sekhmet, the goddess of healing. During his reign, his royal necropolis was at Soleb, and an inscription there refers to a people called the Shashu, that is nomads, of Yahweh, wandering to the east of Egypt. This tallies with the period of 40 years that the Israelites were wandering in the desert. So Amenhotep III is the pharaoh of the sojourn. The father of Amenhotep III was Thutmose IV, who reigned for less than a decade. The basalt dream stele between the paws of the great Sphinx of Giza tells of the divine justification for his reign. He didn't expect to be pharaoh because he wasn't the crown prince, that is, the firstborn, which fits with the biblical account of the 10th plague, which killed all the firstborn. This would also mean that Amenhotep II should not be a firstborn son. And this is true, because the heir apparent, Amenemhat died before his father, Tutmosis III, did. So what of Manetho? Did he get it wrong? Joseph writes again about Manetho in Against Appian 1 verses 26 to 31 and criticises him for his confusing account that seems to mix different events. He again mentions Amenhotep or Amenhotep without giving dates, and it may be that because there are 4 of them, it was too confusing for him. Another writer, Chaeremon, that's Chaeremon, also mentions Amenhotep in the associated Egyptian tales. But frustratingly, there is nothing conclusive that I can read into either account. Well, I hope you didn't find that too confusing. Myself, I'm inclined to go with the explanation from the Armstrong Institute of Biblical Archaeology, which has more information than I had room for here. But as they say, each to his own. See you next time. Bye for now.